in good company. Lee Summit, Missouri.
Hello, Lee Summit. Here's your flash briefing for the week of August 21st. City Council will meet for regular session Tuesday night at 6 in Council Chambers and City Hall. If you can't watch, quickly catch up on City Council meetings by subscribing to the Council Debrief newsletter, which breaks down 3 to 4 key agenda items. Subscribe at cityofls.net. Join District 1 Council members Mia Pryor and Hillary Shields for a town hall on August 30th from 5:30 to 7 p.m. at Bridge Space. Receive an update on major projects and visit with department representatives. This town hall is a come-and-go event. Unable to attend, the meeting will be live streamed on the city's YouTube channel. Stay cool, Lee Summit. It's going to be hot, hot, hot this week. If you need a place to cool down, the lobbies of the J. Thomas Lovell, Gamber, and Longview community centers are cooling centers during business hours. Single visit passes into these community centers will be reduced to half price through August 23rd. The 3 Lee Summit Mid-Continent libraries also serve as cooling centers during regular business hours. And a reminder, be sure to check on the elderly, and children and pets should never be left in the car. Curious about Lee Summit Downtown Market Plaza project? The public is invited to learn more about the dynamic project at a neighborhood meeting on Wednesday, August 23rd at 5:30 p.m. in Council Chambers at City Hall. View updated plans and renderings of the Downtown Market Plaza, ask questions, and meet project and design teams. Thanks for listening and have a great week.
Have you ever been driving around Lee Summit and wondered what's that going to be? What's being built there? Wow, that went up fast. The Development Minute is here to help, highlighting some of the newest projects in Lee Summit, Missouri. The Lee Summit Transfer Facility, located at the Resource Recovery Park in South Lee Summit, is a Missouri Department of Natural Resources regulated facility, providing a location for contractors and developers to recycle debris. The facility, which offers equipment only found in 2 other facilities in the U.S., will break down recyclables like rebar, concrete, and more. Existing city services will continue at the Resource Recovery Park. Rain Tree Village, a senior living community, is being developed off of Highway 150 at Arbor Walk. The 3-phase project on 12 acres will offer independent and assisted living, short-term rehab, and long-term care for residents. The 150,000 square foot facility will have 126 residential units, 60 memory care units, and 80 to 100 staff members. It is set to open in 2024. New Longview is getting Apothecary Wines and Spirits. The wine, beer, and spirits store will offer local, classic, and rare vintages and libations. Opening date coming soon. Smoothie King is coming to 1440 Northeast Douglas Street, south of St. Luke's East Hospital. The smoothie company focuses on using whole fruits, vegetables, and healthy ingredients in all of its blends. The store is set to open on Tuesday, September 12th. Summer Moon Coffee is opening its first Missouri location in Lee Summit at Summit Fair Shopping Center on Saturday, August 12th. The coffee shop uses a wood fire coffee roasting process that offers a different flavor profile than air roasting. The Lee Summit location features a drive-through, online order ahead, and outdoor seating. That's it for the Development Minute. For more about upcoming projects, visit cityofls.net.
You're invited to discover summer fun. Ride the waves in the wave pool. Jump off the diving boards. Take a dip in the Action River. And slide down the slides at our outdoor water park, Summit Waves. After a day in the sun, experience downtown Lee Summit. Enjoy gourmet pizza and delicious food for lunch. Then, cool down with handcrafted ice cream right around the corner. Summer at the Summit, Lee Summit, Missouri.
Traditionally, we think as police officers, those responding to law enforcement needs within the community. But honestly, we are there to serve our citizens, and our citizens do go into crisis. They do have mental health crises, and we're being called to those scenes on a regular basis. In order to help serve those citizens better, we did initiate the Crisis Intervention Team Program. These are officers that are specially trained to de-escalate crisis situations. Recently, we've brought co-responders onto the scene, licensed qualified mental health professionals housed within our police department, and they respond with those officers directly to those scenes where a crisis is occurring so they can interact with that citizen and get them the help they need right there on that scene.
The co-responders are either a bachelor or master level in a behavioral health related field. They wear plain clothes, they don't carry weapons or anything like that.
I have a police radio that I listen to all day. Listen for, those key words: mental health, behavioral health, crisis.
There's a lot of officers that just call for me. I have my own radio number.
I also have the ability to self-dispatch to them and say 982 is en route.
Officers en route, 914, Armstrong.
So typically I arrive after they've made it safe. I'll make contact and get kind of the rundown, and then I just kind of jump right in.
I'm like, hey, my name's Allison. I'm a mental health professional. I'm here to help you. I'm not here to take you to jail or arrest you.
Sometimes all a person needs is a voice, someone neutral, someone outside that, can listen. I do a lot of safety planning, including family, their support network, who's close to you. If they're home alone, who can come over and hang out with you today? Can we lock away your sharps? Can we put up your meds? Do you need meds? Can we get you over to the urgent care to get you assessed for your medications? Some of them also are like, oh, I'm so glad you came. This made me feel so much better.
Our main goal as co-responders is to, one, get people connected to the services that they need, and also divert from emergency rooms and jails.
And they almost get a different view of the police responding. That lets me know you care and the officers care.
Please, please, how can we help you?
My husband has...
In 2020, we had 722 mental health related calls for service. 2022, by that time, 1,479. These mental health related calls for service are increasing. How we're responding to that is increasing the number of crisis intervention team officers we have available, as well as the number of co-responders we have available to respond on these calls.
So what I think is important for the community to know about the co-responder program is that we're here, we exist. All you have to do when you call 911 is ask for us. Say, hey, I want a co-responder to respond to this crisis, and we'll go. I was really struggling about 8 years ago on my personal journey with mental health, and I met some amazing social workers and amazing programs that have helped me get to where I am today. I really couldn't see myself doing anything else. We want to help, and that's what we love to do.
So I had a client, we got a call, she had some suicidal ideations, and she really felt that she had nobody. And getting to know her story and getting to know who comes around and sees you, well, then we found a support person, and they responded immediately, and we made a plan. I called back and checked on her in an hour, and then I checked on her in 2 hours. We were able to get her into the additional services to where she talks to someone every week or more. I just took a person that really just thought they had nobody and nobody would show up for them, and show them you do. And you'll be amazed who is in your corner if you just simply say, I need a little help.
Lee Summit has you covered for all of your summer fun. Head to the downtown Lee Summit Farmers Market, where local meets fresh. Then grab a cup of coffee and discover a variety of shops and boutiques just around the corner. Continue the fun in downtown Lee Summit at a retro arcade bar. Discover your new beer at one of our 6 locally owned breweries. Cool off with some handcrafted cocktails at happy hour. End the night with live music and good company. Summer at the Summit, Lee Summit, Missouri.
Good questions. Yes, Councilmember Edson.
Since this is a cooperative agreement, is this similar to like when we buy things through the market?
It'd be similar. We don't buy through them.
We moved to Lee Summit right before we had our 3rd child, and we ended up raising all 4 of our children here. And it's been just such a great place to raise kids. Well, I'd been involved in government and politics for a long time, different aspects of it. And then when I was raising my kids, I was very involved in different community organizations and involved with the schools. And as my kids got older and I saw them and their friends starting to leave the community, I realized that there were some things that needed to be done in order to attract younger people back to Lee Summit, and I wanted to be part of that conversation. We need to work on economic development and keep trying to get more jobs here that pay well so that they will attract our kids. We have this great school system that we're all paying for, and yet our kids graduate and leave. We need to work with the school districts and with the businesses to create an environment that keeps our kids here. We have a great community with great housing, but we also don't have enough housing that is attainable for middle class. People who are just starting in the workforce can't afford to buy a house here at this point in time. If you take your average firefighter and your teacher and they're married, it's very hard for them to buy a house in Lee Summit. So some of my priorities when I ran were economic development, attainable housing, and public safety. When I ran 6 years ago, our police officers and our firefighters were some of the worst paid public safety folks in the metro area. And in the past 6 years, we've done a great job of getting their pay up, getting their benefits up, and now there will be a public safety tax, which will be a game changer for Lee Summit. It will help us to attract and retain new talent for the coming years. All communities are having a hard time recruiting and retaining police and firefighters. So if we can be a place that they want to come and is desirable, it's going to be great for the well-being of our community. We need to make sure that not only are we paying people well, but that we have enough fire stations as the city grows. We need to make sure that we grow the police department. Something else I'm really proud of, the replacement of Fire Station 4 and 5. I started taking council members on tours of Fire Station number 4 to show them how badly a replacement for that station was needed. There are so many opportunities to get involved in this community, whether it's serving on a committee, whether it's participating in the Citizens Leadership Academy, which the city sponsors. It's easy to sit at home and complain and think you understand how it works, and then when you actually understand how it works, you have a better appreciation for it, and you'll want to get involved more. I just wanted to clarify that. I think Hillary did a great job. Thank you.
Welcome, everyone. Would you please rise for the invocation and stay standing for the Pledge of Allegiance? Hold on.
Heavenly Father, we are thankful for the opportunity to serve the people of our city. Help us to act with character and conviction. Help us to listen with understanding and goodwill. Give us a spirit of service. Let our discussions be wholesome, and may our spirits be lifted because of the friendships we share. We pray for our neighborhood spirit and are always mindful that generosity, peace, and trust will give rise to a strong community. Amen.
All right, again, welcome, everyone. I'm calling to order the City of Lee Summit regular session number 47 as amended. Can I get a roll call, please?
Councilmember Hodges.
Here.
Councilmember DeMauro.
Here.
Councilmember Pryor. Councilmember Felker.
Here.
Councilmember Lovell.
Here.
Councilmember Shields. Councilmember Edson.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Lopez.
Here.
Mayor Baird.
Here. Yeah, could you call for Councilmember Pryor, because she's on Zoom?
Councilmember Pryor.
Here.
All right. The first item tonight is the approval of the agenda. I have a motion by Councilmember DeMauro to approve the agenda, to adopt the agenda, seconded by Councilmember Hodges. Discussion? All right, seeing none, please cast your vote. Councilmember Pryor, you have to do a voice. Councilmember Pryor, can you do a voice vote?
Yes, right now?
Yeah, motion to adopt the agenda. Do you vote aye on that?
Aye.
There we go. Thank you. Please record the vote. All votes are in. 8-0. Thank you. Next is the approval of the consent agenda. I have a motion to adopt the consent agenda by Councilmember Edson, seconded by Councilmember Hodges. Discussion? Seeing none, could I please cast your vote? And Councilmember Pryor?
Aye.
Thank you. All votes are in. Please record the vote. 8 passes, 8-0. Thank you. Next is Council Roundtable. Council Roundtable. Items, these are items of general interest, things going on in the community. Councilmember Pryor?
I just wanted to say good luck to all of the LSR7 kids starting school tomorrow.
Awesome. Thank you. Councilmember Lovell?
Thank you, Mayor. Just wanted to compliment you and the Chamber for State of the City last Friday. It was a great event. Just always nice to get the opportunity to see all that has been done and all that is going to continue being done. And I appreciated seeing all my council members up there too. So it was a great event, great speech, and thanks to all the community partners that were there and participated.
Yep. Thank you all for attending. You guys were great. And thank you for the nice words, kind words. All right, I believe we're going to move on to public hearings. The first one, we're going to close the regular session and open the public hearing in the matter of agenda item 4A, 2023-5800. This is a rezoning from Ag to R1 to RLL, 3904 and 3912 Southwest Pryor Road. Michael Carmack and Deborah Thompson are the applicants. Would all those wishing to speak to this matter please rise and be sworn in by the city clerk. Thank you. Looks like Mr. Johnson's going to start us off.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council. The applicant has chosen to waive their presentation. They did the same at Planning Commission.
Okay.
Start by entering a list of exhibits 1 through 17 into the record.
Please enter into the record Exhibit A 1 through 17.
Okay, before you tonight is a rezoning to RLL. This is being done to facilitate the splitting of some property, the lot line adjustment between two properties. This is known as the Lazy Bull Ranch. I'll defer to the applicant to explain that. To start off, within our comprehensive plan, it's designated as large lot residential. The proposed rezone to RLL conforms to that large lot residential designation. Here you can see the configuration of the properties. Basically, you've got a flag lot there in the back and then the one up front. A condition of approval would be that this finishes up with a minor plat process to finalize those lot lines. Oh, excuse me, I jumped to the end there. So, like I said, unfortunately, kind of a hoop to jump through for the applicants to allow them to do this. My understanding is this was an inherited piece of property. There are existing homes, as you can see there, that this is going to assist with the kind of finalizing of. And you can see the one driveway that goes all the way to the back. We'll get an easement for that to make that function properly, should that ownership change. I think with that, I'm available for questioning. Thank you.
Okay. Questions for Mr. Johnson? Okay, and did you say the applicant was going to say a few words or just questions?
Just if you had questions.
Okay. All right. Councilmember Felker.
Thank you, Mayor. So, Mr. Johnson, again, and I actually drove by this morning. I was down just a little further south. So we're rezoning for the principal purpose to be able to adjust the boundary lines, and
Yes.
that occurs through the minor plat, just for the sake of
Yes, sir.
process. And I'm sorry, we're making, this is going to be ag to
Residential large lot, RLL. The minimum lot size in ag is 10 acres. That's why that has to occur.
Got it. And then I saw in the packet that it's going to shift from like so many acres to another set of acres. Again, that's going to be with the other application for the minor plat.
That's correct.
Will we see that?
No, that's an
yes,
administrative approval. Yeah.
Here, I think that's all I have.
Okay,
Thank you, Mr.
thank you.
Johnson.
Thank you. Councilmember DeMauro.
Thank you, Mayor. Josh, and you may have said this, are the existing structures staying in place where they're at now on the
That's my
on the picture?
understanding. Yes.
What about the pond? Is that staying there also, or is that mitigated to allow for building? Everything stays, right? Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you. Okay, is there anyone here that wishes to speak in favor or in opposition to the application? Please come forward. All right, are there any additional questions from council? Very good. Does the applicant care to make any comment at this point? Okay, thank you. Hearing no further testimony, I'm closing the public hearing and reopening the regular session. Is there any council discussion on this application? Very good. Seeing no further discussion, Councilmember DeMauro, would you please read Bill number 23-162?
Thank you, Mayor. I move to advance to second reading Bill number 23-162, an ordinance approving rezoning from District Ag and R1 to District RLL for approximately 9.62 acres located at 3904 Southwest Pryor Road and 3912 Southwest Pryor Road, in accordance with the provisions of Chapter 33, the Unified Development Ordinance of Lee Summit Code of Ordinances for the city of Lee Summit, Missouri.
Thank you. We have a motion to move to second reading, Bill number 23-162 by Councilmember DeMauro, seconded by Councilmember Felker. Discussion? Seeing none, please cast your vote. Councilmember Pryor?
Aye.
Thank you. All votes are in. Please record the vote. And it passes 8-0. Thank you all. All right. I believe we have another one, don't we? Yep. We have, I'm going to close the regular session, open the public hearing in the matter of UDO amendment for an ordinance amending Chapter 33, Article 7, subdivisions of the Lee Summit Code of Ordinances to allow for requirement of public infrastructure with the administrative approval of minor plats. City of Lee Summit is the applicant. Would all those wishing to speak to this matter please rise and be sworn in by the city clerk.
Good evening, Mayor, members of council. Joshua Johnson, Director of Development Services. So tonight we have a UDO amendment, and it's kind of meant to plug a hole in our ordinances, quite frankly. And that really is to require public infrastructure, with the administrative approval of minor plats that create new lots. This went to CEDC on April 12th of this year, and at Planning Commission on July 27th of this year. At Planning Commission, there was no testimony on it. There were certain questions about scenarios and things on how this might apply, but they did ultimately recommend unanimously approval of the amendment to the City Council. So I thought in my presentation I would talk about the main functions of minor plats to start off with, in case you're not familiar. First off, you can divide property into 3 lots as a minor plat. What you can't do, and it's not on this list I've got before you, you can't prepare any common ground through a minor plat. You can't create common ground, things like that. And you can't dedicate right away. If you have to do that, it would have to either be through a separate document or you go through the final plat process that the council sees all the time with the larger subdivisions. Like the previous application, you can adjust a lot line between 2 lots. You can adjust building lines. Those are kind of, if there's older setback lines on a plat, you could adjust those through a minor plat. You can combine lots, as you see in point D there. E, I've never seen here. I'm sure it's happened. It has to basically do with condoing off some multifamily type structures. And then there's some provisos there. So what we're trying to avoid with this amendment, and if you read the staff report, which I'm sure all of you did, we're trying to avoid situations like this. I mentioned this in the staff report quite a few times. It was the main point I brought up because it's the main thing staff has seen. Really things like dedicating sidewalk when somebody wants to divide their property up. Things of that nature. It could apply to water or sewer, but usually those are present where people are trying to create new lots. And so with that, in talking to our legal staff, we didn't have the authority through our ordinance to require public infrastructure on these administrative approvals. That authority normally rests with the council and that's expressly given. And so that's a part of the ordinance tonight, is the statement of you authorizing the Director of Development Services to require public improvements with minor plats. And again, those are only the ones that create new lots that we're applying that to, not ones where we're simply adjusting the boundary between them. With that, that's really the specific ordinance language I've got as a part of the presentation. I've got the whole thing in front of me if we want to dig in to some other provisos. I will say with this process, basically the law department was like, you need to create an appeal process since you're now requiring this. It's kind of a new requirement. You need an appeal process. So the way that appeal process works, it's similar to the way the council sees a PDP. Somebody would appeal, and then we would notice in a similar fashion that we do other things. And then we go to the Planning Commission. They would make a recommendation to the council, and again, you would have the final say on that appeal, whether we are or not going to require that public infrastructure on the minor plat. So that in a nutshell is this UDO amendment, and I'm here for questions.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Felker.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Mr. Johnson. So just talked about what those public improvement requirements might be. And again, just to emphasize, we're talking about creating a
new lot.
I was just trying to work through scenarios. If one large lot is subdivided that, and if there was sidewalks on two sides, you would say the new lots, because you're going 1 to 2 lots, you would require sidewalks to go across. Is that an accurate?
Yeah, along the frontage of those lots, especially if there's sidewalk on either side, or if there's plans to have sidewalk. What we're really trying to do is alleviate, I would say, the public expense for sidewalk gaps, things of that nature. And the idea there is, hey, there's an impact, there's new people here, we need to get adequate public infrastructure.
So there, we just saw one coming through they weren't actually applying for the minor plat today, but would that require something of them? Meaning
Possibly.
theirs is likely going to be 2 in a line. I'm guessing someone inherited 2/3, someone inherited it.
Oh,
I don't know.
yeah, that wouldn't apply to theirs actually, because the way this is worded now, it says only for those minor plats that create a new lot. So with them, they're just adjusting a boundary. This would not trigger.
I'm trying to think of how we don't unduly burden the asking too much, but quite often those minor plats would be with the intent that you're going to put something additional when you're creating a new lot.
Yeah.
You're going to have something additional. So probably someone is investing in some fashion, either personally or for other. So we're using the term public infrastructure pretty broadly. Does the ordinance get into more detail, and is there a difference between public improvements versus public infrastructure?
So in the ordinance itself, it refers back to the part of the subdivision code that talks about public improvement requirements. And that's where it gets specific.
So I guess, all right, maybe that's a question I'm thinking about, is the term public infrastructure versus public improvements. If there's like there's a specific term, could we be using public improvements versus public infrastructure? And so we're not.
So let me read out the specific language, and maybe it's broad enough to cover your concern. Minor plats that create new lots shall construct public infrastructure in conformance with the provisions of this article. So that's the subdivisions article.
That's not, which is that one that's in the packet? Sorry.
Yeah, it's on page 2 of 30 of the overall ordinance. I can put it up on the overhead too if you'd like. I never get to use that, so I love it. I'm Baby Bushek. How about that? So it's J up there at the top in the washed out red.
Okay. Okay, so you're kind of underscoring one of my questions, which is, so that uses the term public infrastructure, but I think throughout it uses the term public improvements. I've got some language I think I want to change anyway, or suggest a change, but it looks like we only use public infrastructure once right there. But if we're talking about public improvements, that's used 40 times in what you've got in front of us. But it might be that if there's only one change, we change that. I have some language I think we should just kind of clean up that language anyway.
Okay.
But so I can share that with you. I don't know if there's other questions, but my thinking is when you look at the section 7.020, the director shall be responsible for, and then it lists all the, the kind of the stipulations. We then get down to minor plats. So I suggest that when I read through this, it says minor plats that create new lots shall construct. So minor plats don't construct anything.
Oh, it should be people.
Yeah. So I had language like this: no person shall create a minor plat who does not construct public improvements in conformance with the provisions of this. And I use the word chapter because chapter is used throughout. Article is not really used throughout, even though I'm guessing it's really the article we're referencing.
Mm-hmm.
So my words were: no person shall create a minor plat, does not construct public improvements in conformance with the provisions of this chapter.
So
Don't think that changes I think that just makes it consistent with the language above and make sure we're using the public improvements term, since it's in essence, almost kind of like a defined term because it's used so much throughout.
So if I'm hearing your edit correctly, you're saying no person shall create a minor plat without,
Does not construct, I mean, we could talk about how we want to do that, but who does not construct public improvements in conformance with the provisions of this chapter.
so I think that works, but the way you've reworded that, that applies to lot line adjustments and every other thing. Is that the intent there?
I want to stay within the intent that we've communicated so far. I don't
So we
want to
need to
change the
say-
intent. I'm not trying to change the intent.
So
if
I think that's fine, but I would put the phrase new lots in there somewhere.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so, yes,
So we can make that change maybe between first and second reading, if that's all right.
yep, that's fine. Yeah.
Okay.
No
There's a
person shall-
definite-
Or no person shall apply for a minor plat that creates a new lot.
Yep.
Who does not construct public improvements in conformance with provisions of this chapter.
Okay, I think I've got it, and I've got a video to watch if I don't. So, also, Mr. Bushak just pointed out in our definitions part of the UDO, public infrastructure / improvements are interchangeable, but I think this wording's more accurate anyway, because, yeah, people construct things. And you evacuate a building, you don't evacuate people, so you've ever heard that one.
Okay, those are all the questions I have for Mr. Johnson, Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Other questions or discussion? I think just the fact that there's an appeal process, we just want to make sure that we're being reasonable with regard to, if you're trying to require improvements that go to nowhere.
Yeah, I don't
You
think
know, we don't want improvements that go to nowhere. Like when you showed that photo earlier, like we need a sidewalk there.
Yeah.
But there might be a situation where, depending on the circumstances,
Yeah.
a sidewalk might go nowhere to nothing.
We also have a fee in lieu of process that
Right.
would say we spend it in the same address
Got
grid
it.
as well, so.
Very good. I'm not seeing further discussion or questions. I guess I'm in the middle of a public hearing, aren't I? So I need to go to, did you have an exhibit, sir?
Oh, I thought I did that. 1 through 11.
All right, please enter into the record Exhibit A 1 through 11. Okay, is there anyone that would like to speak in favor or in opposition to this application? Please come forward. Any additional questions from council? Does the applicant, any further comment, Mr. Johnson? All right, hearing no further testimony, I'm closing the public hearing, reopening the regular session. Councilmember Edson, would you please read Bill number 23-163?
Thank you, Mayor. I move to advance to second reading, Bill number 23-163, an ordinance amending Chapter 33 Unified Development Ordinance of the Lee Summit Code of Ordinances, Article 7, Subdivisions to allow for requirement of public infrastructure with the administrative approval of minor plats.
Thank you. We have a motion to should be a move to second reading. Yep. By Councilmember Edson, seconded by Councilmember Lovell. Discussion? Yes, Councilmember Felker.
Thank you, Mayor. So, I'm sorry, let me clarify. Mr. Johnson, was your suggestion that we advance this to second reading and then you would submit when we actually second read this, or when we read it for adoption, that you'll provide an amendment? So, okay, I'd make sure I don't have to make a motion now.
Mr. Johnson said yes, for the record.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor. That's all I have.
Thank you. All right. Seeing no further discussion, please cast your vote. Councilmember Pryor?
Aye.
Thank you. All votes are in. Please record the vote. It does pass 8-0, and we'll make sure we check the yeah. Thank you. Okay, I believe we have one more. So I'm going to close the regular session and open the public hearing in the matter of Chapter 100 Master Plan for Lakewood Business Park Industrial Project. North Oak Safety Storage LLC is the applicant, affiliate of Ward Development. Would all those wishing to speak to this matter please rise and be sworn in by the city clerk. Mr. Bushek.
Good evening, David Bushak, Chief Counsel of Economic Development and Planning. This is a public hearing for a Chapter 100 master plan for this industrial project, and we'll have the developer present first, and then I will provide my comments.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor. Good evening, Council. Kurt Peterson here with Pulcinelli, but on behalf of the Ward family, one of their projects. I will give you the spoiler alert. This happens sometimes. We were here recently with this application in the form of a conceptual presentation, I should say, and nothing has changed. Sometimes that happens. We just went back and worked with Mr. David Martin and David Bushek also on the Chapter 100 plan. But as I've heard from several council people, and this makes total sense, this is the true proper procedure. So you'll hear, I'm apologizing for being a little repetitive, but again, just as you watch the ball, nothing has changed other than a footnote at the end that I'll flag when I get to that. So with that, no further delay. We'll talk about the developer and the project, the competition to get tenants we want for industrial projects like this in our city, the proposed public incentives, and then talk about why it's good for the taxpayers in the city, we believe. For starters, starting with the developer, this is the Ward family that's behind this project. This is a third-generation real estate development company that has assets across all asset classes and lots of experience. In fact, you approved and they're under construction for a 250,000-foot industrial project just nearby here, actually just east of the airport. The project site for this particular project is the southwest quadrant of Strother and 470. More specifically, as you squint at the screen, that's Industrial Drive, Northeast Jones Industrial Drive running east-west at the top, and then Northeast Independence, that's forming the eastern boundary there. This is just north of the east-west runway, if getting your bearings there. The proposed project is 8 buildings making up about 400,000 square feet of industrial. This has both warehouse, distribution, and possibly light manufacturing, but also different about this project compared to the other industrial projects we've done together in the last, now it's been what, a couple of years, is that there's room for flex space, as we call it. So some smaller buildings that tend to attract professionals. It can be engineering companies. It can be the offices for contractors, things like that. So you also have flex space that's likely to happen in the smaller of these buildings. This is a slide that just reminds us this is a very competitive environment in the greater Kansas City area for the very best tenants, and that's largely what this proposal is all about, making sure we get the best new businesses to the city. This is a slide that's expanded a bit, and Mr. Bushek at the conceptual went into some detail about how this was the original set of industrial project incentives in the area that the council, when they did the very first Scanell project, based the package or the structure of incentives on. And then there's been a few more in recent years that Mr. Bushek highlighted at conceptual that you probably recall, and I won't go into detail, but the bottom line thesis is here. This is still what the city is doing is very competitive and in line with those more competitive cities in the area. So full steam ahead with that structure. That structure looks like this. It is a Chapter 100 that would provide 2 benefits under that. First would provide sales tax exemption on construction materials. And then second provides a property tax abatement that goes to the benefit of the user, the tenant. Because again, what are we trying to do? We're trying to get the best new businesses and jobs into the city. So for the first 10 years, as it shows on the screen, the tenants would have a net benefit of 75% abatement. Then the other 25% goes to the taxing jurisdictions. For the second set of 10 years, years 11 through 20, it would be a 50% net abatement to the end users, and the taxing jurisdictions would get 50%. This is the slide that estimates the amount of sales tax exemption impact on each taxing jurisdiction. The second yellow line you can see is the city's estimated share, sales and use tax included, of 172,000, which makes up the last yellow line. About 22% of the overall benefit would be coming from the city. One detail here is you might remember on the prior industrial deals, we've had a public improvement assessment, which I won't explain all that again unless somebody wants it. But here we substituted that based on just the nature of working with staff and what's going on with this project. And so what's proposed here is actually to take the red line on the screen is the western edge of the project that's right, the shared boundary with the airport. And there's a big sanitary main extension that needs to happen that will benefit both the city's airport and this project. And so what's proposed, although, and I know Mr. Bushek, I won't steal his thunder, will explain this to you in more detail. This slide right now isn't actually up before you tonight for a vote, but it's something we had in the packet as a term sheet that will come back before you as a cost sharing agreement for sanitary later, but it's certainly part of the overall picture here. So we wanted to make sure you were seeing this. And so that's probably enough for now on the sanitary sharing, but there's no public improvement assessments on this master development. This is the first of several slides on the value proposition for the city. Why does this continue to make sense? We hope you'll agree. This is infill. You know this property. There's nothing there. There's been development generally around it. It's producing all of $86 a year for the city in terms of property taxes. You can see the numbers on the screen, both during the Chapter 100 and then after, are dramatically higher, which benefits not only the city but certainly the school district and the other taxing jurisdictions. Beyond that, we show this slide a lot because we find it very compelling using KC80, help me, Mayor.
KC80C.
Just can't get it off my lips.
Yep.
Data that was tailored specifically for Lee Summit. We looked at, if you create 100 manufacturing jobs, how many additional jobs as a spillover effect do you have? And you can see on the screen 73. We asked the same sort of question. If you create 73 additional manufacturing jobs, what kind of economic output is generated? You can see large number, 42 million. And we do that for each of the type of users that would go in here, including transportation, warehouse, and then also you can see farther down the screen, professional, scientific, and technical services have a very high impact in terms of secondary jobs and total economic output as well. And those are those kind of flex spaces I talked about. With that, I also wanted to anticipate, this is a repeat, but it's very important to always highlight the, again, with the specificity, the amount of jobs. And oftentimes I'm asked with projects like this, well, exactly how many jobs? That was a general metric you just gave. What about for this deal? So it always depends on what exact user mix you have across the 400,000 feet. So I'm only going to make an assumption, and I'm going to do the lowest assumption. I'm going to assume it's all warehouse and industrial because that's the lowest jobs per square foot. By the way, it will not be given this different size of building, so it'll be something greater than this. Our estimate is always about 1,000 to 1,500 square feet per employee when you're doing the warehouse distribution space. So if you took that times our square footage, you would have between 266 to 400 new jobs. And again, I'm telling you, that is a floor here. It would be higher than that. And yeah, hopefully that's compelling. I said I had a footnote at the very end, and I do. So here's the brief version. As we moved from conceptual to tonight's first reading of this Chapter 100 plan, we had a tax situation arise, which many of you know you can get great tax advantages by doing 1031 sort of situations where you sell something, but you got to park your proceeds you get from that in a certain amount of time. So again, I'm being short, but I want you to understand the footnotes here. Not like, what did he say? So as we were moving towards this, the replacement property fell through for the Ward family, and they had these hot proceeds, right, that they had to place. So really the only place that made any sense was to get them into building 1. Remember, there's 8 buildings. It would be the northernmost building, along with Northeast McGuire, which is the public street that's, and then I could put it up here, couldn't I? That's at the top, that's up by building 1. And so what that means is, in your ordinance, if you look at section 3, so McGuire's right here, if you're looking on the screen, and then building 1 goes right here. So what we did, and rather than change the Chapter 100 plan, in working with Mr. Martin and Mr. Bushek, in section 3 of the draft ordinance, you'll see that lot 1 and Northeast McGuire are actually taken out of what's approved as part of the Chapter 100 plan. You're like, what are you talking about? We needed to do that because technically they had to get going to meet their timeline to get the proceeds in there, but we hadn't been approved yet, and the policy says you can't do that. So we just, again, in a sense, took scissors and snipped that out of the project. So that is my footnote. I'd be happy to answer any questions you have about that. But hopefully, as the previous projects that have come before you in the last several years for industrial, using this very good structure to get the best tenants here, I hope you find it compelling. And Mayor, like usual, if there's questions, I'd be happy to answer them after Mr. Bushek presents.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, I will begin my presentation by entering into the record exhibits 1 through 8 as they appear in your meeting packet.
Please enter into the record the exhibit with items 1 through 8.
I will walk through my portion of the presentation, and as Mr. Peterson said, this is a bit of a repeat as compared to the conceptual, but I will be thorough but brief to make sure we have a complete record. So the incentive request matches what you saw at the conceptual presentation. During the construction period will be the sales and use tax exemption on construction materials. Then during the first 10 years of the life of each building, 75% abatement, 25% pilots, and then during years 11 through 20, 50% abatement, 50% pilots. There are 8 buildings. As he indicated with his footnote discussion, the first building will not be used in the implementation process, so this abatement will actually apply to 7 of the 8 buildings. But the numbers down below only factor in the abatement period for each building. And what I mean by that is the total abatement period for all buildings is 29 years, but the numbers that I'm going to walk through only present to you the 20-year slice of that 29-year period for each building. So we're not counting the property taxes that flow to the taxing districts when those buildings come back on the tax rolls. That's consistent with how we've presented projects like this in the past. This is a unique situation. We decided to go ahead and analyze the numbers in that fashion. Benefit to the taxing districts, the taxes today, and this is actually based on 2023 valuations with the levies yet to be set by the taxing districts, nominal taxes are produced. During the first year of pilots, after the first 2 buildings are constructed, this is the pilots that would be produced for the taxing districts. And then over the 29-year period, about 5.49 million in pilots from the tax abatement period. And again, I'll emphasize, we did this snapshot and we did these numbers factoring in all 8 buildings. So one of those 8 buildings will be on the tax rolls in full. So these numbers are a bit off as compared to the plan. This analyzes the plan data. So the total revenues that flow to the taxing districts, when you factor that building number 1 will not be included in this pilot schedule. It'll be on the tax rolls like normal, and the revenues flowing to the taxing districts will actually be higher than what I'm showing you based on that footnote discussion. The value of the incentive request to the developer then, this is what we analyzed to compare across projects on an apples to apples basis. Total project costs of about $78.3 million. The value of the sales and use tax exemption, about 1.6% of that total project cost. And then the net present value calculation of the tax abatement that they receive is about 5.6% of total project costs. Total benefit to the developer, about 7.2% of project costs. As we've discussed on many occasions, the range is roughly between 5 and 25%. This is at the lower end of that range, and this is consistent with other industrial projects that you've approved. Final number here. Impact to the city only from this abatement request. The sales and use tax exemption, about one quarter of the total sales and use tax exemption benefit to the developer, closer to maybe 27%. And then the real property tax abatement, with the city being 17% of the total tax bill, that's the impact to the city if you approve this, as compared to if the project happened and it was fully on the tax rolls. This then is our 1-page simple summary, so you have a clear understanding of precisely what the incentive request is. Both are through Chapter 100. You've got the sales tax exemption and the real property tax abatement, the durations that I described previously. The purpose for both of these incentive requests, both components, is to reduce costs to the developer. And then these are equivalent to the numbers I just showed you. Total benefit to the developer, 7.2% of total project costs. last slide that I will show you, and this is also identical to the slide that we discussed at the conceptual presentation. This is our updated snapshot of the large-scale industrial projects on the Missouri side of the Kansas City region that have been provided by our surrounding cities in the Kansas City area. And to highlight some of the items on this table for you, the new projects as compared to the previous iteration you saw earlier this year are in yellow. Lee Summit is colored in green. We have an increased variety of cities that are providing these incentive packages to large-scale industrial projects. The new projects include some of the city's competitors, if you will, our neighboring cities, Raymore, Independence, and Blue Springs. They're also large-scale industrial projects, but the summary, so the analysis that I've discussed with you and the footnotes down here remain effectively the same with these new projects added. The duration of the abatement across these projects is roughly 19 years. Some are 20, the majority are 20, some are 25, some are 15, 16, so the average is about 19 years. During the first 10 years, the abatement is typically over 90%, and then during the second 10-year period, years 11 through 20, it's roughly 50%. So the incentive request tonight is equivalent to what we see in the region, what we see with our competitor cities in terms of industrial development, and it's roughly consistent with what the city council has approved in the past for other industrial projects. One project that you have approved, but we're still working on the implementation documents, is the Performance Food Group project, and that will be added to the next iteration of this slide. That will appear in green. That's so the city's approved 5 major industrial incentives over the last several years. This gives you the updated snapshot on the competitive landscape for industrial projects. But as you can see, Lee Summit is clearly a participant in this endeavor now that we have 5 projects on the list, and this would be number 6. That concludes my discussion for the public hearing.
Very good. Thank you. Questions for Mr. Bushek or for applicant? Councilmember DeMoro.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Peterson, I have a really fast, probably simple question, and that is, being that the first building number 1, is going to be not included in the incentive proceeds project, how are you going to segregate the Chapter 100 buildings and the tax abatement buildings from building 1 so they don't get commingled?
It's a separate lot is the short answer.
Just and it
we'll
will
have a separate tax bill, all that. So it is by nature segregated.
Okay, just it won't be a problem. And I mean, they develop or they deliver construction materials. This goes to building 1. This goes to the rest.
They're right.
Sounds
Sorry, it's not
simple.
more complicated.
Okay, well, I appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Other questions? Councilmember Felker.
Thank you, Mayor. So building 1, and did I hear there are 2 buildings that we're aiming for in year 1?
Councilman Felker, are you asking which were the ones that what was cut out, or are you asking what happens first?
I was at the latter. Just it sounded obviously yes. Building 1 is separated out from the Chapter 100, and that's the one that you're starting on very soon. And is there I thought I heard you say there's a second building also starting at the same, as soon as this is done. Is that accurate?
I didn't intend to say that, although I'll tell you, and again, we try to be brief. We could talk for longer. One thing neither one of us said, neither Mr. Bushek nor myself, is that while it's set up as a potentially 9-year build, I will eat my shoe if it takes that long. Maybe not eat my shoe. I'll eat my broccoli. I do not think it's demand driven, right? It always is. It's demand driven. No one goes out and builds 8 buildings, right, before they start leasing up. I do not think it will take that long to lease up, especially being right there, interstate, airport, all of that. But to your question, is building 2 on the same pace as building 1? No, they're immediately doing building 1 because of those tax reasons, and we'll see what the market does. But I bet you won't be long before you see building 2, building 3.
Okay. And I was looking at the exhibit on the ordinance. Just it looked like the plan is for building 8 to be the next one. Not that I really care, but I was just curious because I saw it on there and I thought I'd heard you say there was going to be a second building soon. So anyway, so thank you. I think I have a question for Mr. Bushek. So this is just me trying to jog my own memory. When we've looked at these in the past, we often say, well, what's the reason for the incentive? And this one says is to reduce the cost to the developer. Has that always been the basis when it comes to these Chapter 100 industrial projects, or have there sometimes been other purposes that are fulfilled with the abatement, or has that always been the purpose?
I guess looking across the spectrum of all of the industrial projects you've approved incentives for, there's really two reasons typically. One is I framed it as reduce cost to the developer, but I guess technically it reduced cost to the developer so they have competitive lease rates so they can secure tenants that would otherwise go to the incentivized projects in other cities. But that's how I'm sort of encapsulating that in the phrase reduce cost to developer. And then the second, which is not present tonight, and we discussed it at the conceptual, is in some cases there's a public improvement assessment piece to reimburse the developer for construction of certain public improvements. That's not the case tonight. And as Mr. Peterson discussed, we have come to an agreement on how we're going to share sewer costs. But technically speaking, that's not part of the incentive package tonight. And it has been in the past on some projects.
Okay. So, and what I heard earlier was that cost sharing agreement is something we will see at a later date?
Correct.
Relatively soon, or is that something that's?
Yeah, I think relatively soon because the developer has indicated they're ready to go. And we were just talking today about how they can get started on the process of the bidding and the mechanics that are required to get started on the sewer improvements, meaning developers ready to go, ready to build those. So we will be negotiating that agreement very soon and should return to you.
We done a similar cost sharing type of, I know it's not the subject of our conversation now, but have we done a similar cost sharing agreement with any of the other prior projects or a different type of project?
Yes, for other type of projects. As an example, we've done cost sharing for certain of the public improvements that are associated with the construction of the Bailey Road Middle School. Bailey Road Middle School with the school district. And there was, I can't remember which project now, but we've done a cost sharing arrangement where, like for sewer upsizing, for example, developer has to put in a certain size. They agree to upsize it pursuant to our requirements. We have a mechanism where we certify the cost of that upsizing and we reimburse them after it's constructed. So we've done that before.
Yeah. And so was that cost sharing part of that agreement something that was, my question, my thought is, was this added in after we pulled building 1 out?
No, it was already part of the plan as we were preparing the documents for you tonight. The fact that they pulled building 1 out was a completely independent matter, separate from the sewer issue.
Okay, and is there any reason why we wouldn't, is it just there's a couple pieces in place now, or not in place yet for us to do that now, why that hasn't come through, or is that just
yes,
it's further behind?
Yes, it's just further behind, and it's normal for that to trail the incentive package like this. And the main reason that I included the basic term sheet in the meeting packet was to let you know that we're already discussing that, so it didn't become a point of concern tonight in case you were, you asked those questions essentially.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Bushek. Appreciate it. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Lopez.
Thanks, Mayor. I just have a couple questions. One, David, while you're standing up there right now, one for you. I don't think it's a huge deal, but I guess I am curious how we go about with naming rights of business parks. And this name here, obviously, it's being referred to as the Lakewood Business Park. Don't we have a Lakewood Business Park already in the area?
Well, that name comes from the developer. That's the best I can tell you. When a project is initially presented by a developer, sometimes it doesn't even have a name. The developer is going to do a project and we ask them, can you please give it a name so we have something to refer to it, both when we're talking at the staff level and then when it's presented to you. That's about as complicated as it gets. I mean, it's something the developer chose. So if there's a concern about the actual name,
like I said, I mean, it's not a big concern. I mean, if all the rules are being followed and we're following policies, I mean, I don't have any concerns. However, I mean, I don't know if that impacts our public safety, first responders, if there are issues, if there is a similar park nearby. You know, I mean, I know we go by addresses, but, so that's just kind of an open question.
Go ahead.
So we try really hard. I'm not being Kurt Peterson, being specific to Ward, but we run into this a lot. And it's funny, of any segment, it happens with industrial the most, because what do you think of when you see a project like this? You think, oh, it's a business park. So you name right? And so we get dupes. I just realized something as you were asking that question. We realized that was a duplicate somewhere along the line. So if you were to happen to look at the term sheet for the sanitary sewer cost sharing agreement that we were just talking about, which came later, right? Look at the name on here, Lakewood Business Center, for the
Business Center.
For the very reason that you're saying. So, good eyes.
Just caught my attention. So thank you for that. And while you're up there, just one follow-up question for you. You already talked about the schedule and the timeline, which is fine. You're looking to building all 8 buildings within a 9-year span, whatever the market demands are. I get that. The first 2 buildings you're going to build by 2025, roughly. What sizes are those first 2 buildings?
If you're visual like me, we're going to put it on the screen as to the rated. And they actually can go in any order. Building 1 made sense because it's a little bit segregated at the top, but these could go in any order. But you always have to start with a plan. And so if you can see the graphic, Lopez off to the left there.
Yes.
Question?
So those will be the sizes of those first 2.
Regardless. And really all 8, right, are the square footage is off to the side. And while they could go in sequence, that ordering makes sense. They also there could be a situation where they go out of sequence. Like you get a user that's a professional service user. You've done building 1 and they want to do building 3 because that's 20,000 feet and they want to take all that. So building 3 could go before building 2, but that generally gives you a sense of both sequence and size.
Makes sense. I appreciate that. Yeah, just market demand. I get that. And I know smaller buildings are probably a little bit more demand, freestanding. But yeah, thank you. That answers my question. I appreciate it. Mayor, that's all I have.
All right, thank you. Okay, I'm not seeing other questions. I'll just, Mr. Peterson, on that question Councilmember Felker had earlier on cost, it actually comes up sometimes later on too, with regard to, usually is it accurate to say the developer's trying to hit that, or the builder's trying to hit that sweet spot between passing the savings on to the client, but also meeting a return on investment? And because I do think that you've got to, they're married to each other. They're very symbiotic, whatever, as far as you've got to get the lease rate down to be competitive, and then the rate. But definitely there should be some savings to the tenant to get it to market rate. Is that accurate?
Yeah, this is an important point. I will jump up on that, Mayor. So everything Mr. Bushek said was right. I'm just going to put a point on it. When we're talking about the sales tax exemption, there could be some savings, net savings to the developer. They try to pass it on. It's the mayor's exact point. They try to be competitive, and in every situation is different. The big piece, which is the predictable pilots, right? This pilot schedule is 100% flowing to the tenants. Why? Because in industrial leases like this, we call them triple net, and one of the ends is property taxes. So when you take those down, you take the nets or the triple net down, meaning all of that savings goes to get the best users. That's the little more detailed thing. It's what you're saying.
And it creates certainty for the tenant.
100%. That's a big deal, especially in this county.
Okay. That's all I got. Where are we at on this? Is there anyone here that wishes to speak in favor or in opposition to the application? Come forward. Any additional questions from council? Okay. Peterson, do you care to make any further comment?
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Hearing no further testimony, I'm closing the public hearing and reopening the regular session. Is there any council discussion on this application? Oh, yes, Councilmember Felker. Yep.
Just, Mayor, just to say thank you, Mr. Bushek, for updating you and your team. I don't know who all plays a role in it, but this kind of information is priceless, and I don't think should forget to thank you for how helpful this is at kind of couching these decisions for us and giving us data. So I just wanted to say thanks.
Yep. Thank you. Okay. All right. Councilmember Pryor, are you prepared to read this one from Zoom land? Or do you want me to have somebody else read it?
Somebody else, because I do not have the agenda pulled up.
All right. That's okay.
Thank you.
Councilmember Felker says he'll do it for us.
Mayor, I'd like to move to advance to second reading Bill number 23-164, an ordinance approving a master plan for an industrial development project for the Lakewood Business Park Project.
All right. Thank you. We have a motion to move to second reading Bill number 23-164 by Councilmember Felker, seconded by Councilmember DeMoro. Discussion? I will do one of those little thank yous too, because this product, we just needed this so bad for so many years. This smaller product that's that 20,000, 50,000. I mean, it just, just doesn't exist until Ward Development started building these recently, along with a couple other people. But they fill up fast, so I think those 9 buildings will get built a lot sooner than, or 8 buildings than 9 years. But you never know what the economy will do in a few years. So anyway, I like the product, and I like the buildings that they've been building. So with that said, I'm going to call for the vote, please. Oh, Councilmember Pryor.
Aye.
Thank you. All votes are in. Please record the vote, and it passes 8-0. Thank you, Mr. Peterson. Yep. That takes us to public comments.
Mayor Baird, we have not received any public comments.
All right, thank you. Do you all need a break? All right, then we will continue. That will take us to proposed ordinances forwarded from committee. Councilmember Lovell, would you please read Bill number 23-165?
Thank you, Mayor. I move to advance the second reading Bill number 23-165, an ordinance awarding the bid for project number 815 for the Crack Seal FY24 Program to Pavement Management LLC in the amount of $327,000 and authorizing the city manager to execute an agreement for the same.
Thank you. We have a motion to move to second reading Bill number 23-165 by Councilmember Lovell, seconded by Councilmember Felker. Discussion? Seeing none, please cast your vote. Councilmember Pryor?
Aye.
All votes are in. Please record the vote. Passes 8-0. Councilmember Lovell, would you please?
I move for adoption Bill number 23-165, an ordinance awarding the bid for project number 815 for the Crack Seal fiscal year 24 program to Pavement Management LLC in the amount of $327,000 and authorizing the city manager to execute an agreement for the same.
Thank you. We have a motion to adopt Bill number 23-165 by Councilmember Lovell, seconded by Councilmember Hodges. Discussion? Please cast your vote. Member Pryor?
Aye.
Thank you. All votes are in. Please record the vote. It's adopted 8-0. Thank you. Councilmember Felker, would you please read Bill number 23-166?
Mayor, I'd move to advance to second reading Bill number 23-166, an ordinance approving modification number 2 to an agreement for professional engineering services for 3rd Street improvements from Jefferson Street to Blue Parkway, RFQ number 2020-066, between the city of Lee Summit, Missouri and WSP USA, Inc. for an increase of $106,000 for the amended basic services with an amended not to exceed amount of $835,300 and authorizing the city manager to execute the same.
Thank you. We have a motion to move to second reading, Bill number 23-166 by Councilmember Felker, seconded by Councilmember Hodges. Discussion? Seeing none, please cast your vote. Member Pryor?
Aye.
You. All votes are in. Please record the vote. It does move to second reading. Councilmember Felker, would you please?
Mayor, I'd like to move for the adoption of Bill number 23-166. Excuse me. An ordinance approving modification number 2 to an agreement for professional engineering services for 3rd Street improvements from Jefferson Street to Blue Parkway, RFQ number 2020-066, between the City of Lee Summit, Missouri and WSP USA, Inc. for an increase of $106,000 for the amended basic services with an amended not to exceed amount of $835,300 and authorizing the city manager to execute the same.
Thank you. We have a motion to adopt Bill number 23-166 by Councilmember Felker, seconded by Councilmember Hodges. Discussion? Please cast your vote. Councilmember Pryor?
Aye.
All votes are in. Please record the vote. That bill is adopted. Thank you. Councilmember Hodges, would you please read Bill number 23-167?
Thank you. I move to second reading Bill number 23-167, an ordinance approving a cooperative agreement contract number 2023-046 with Uretek USA, Inc. for on-call soil and pavement stabilization services for a period of 1 year with 3-year possible 1-year renewals, and authorizing the city manager to execute an agreement for the same.
Thank you. We have a motion to move to second reading Bill number 23-167 by Councilmember Hodges, seconded by Councilmember Edson. Discussion? Seeing none, please cast your vote. Councilmember Pryor?
Aye.
Thank you. All votes are in. Please record the vote. Does move to second reading unanimously. Councilmember Hodges, would you please?
I move for the adoption of Bill number 23-167, an ordinance approving a cooperative agreement contract number 2023-046 with Uretek USA, Inc. for on-call soil and pavement stabilization services for a period of 1 year with 3 possible 1-year renewals, and authorizing the city manager to execute an agreement for the same.
All right, thank you. We have a motion to adopt Bill number 23-167 by Councilmember Hodges, seconded by Councilmember Edson. Discussion? Please cast your vote. Councilmember Pryor?
Aye.
Thank you. All votes are in. Please record the vote. Bill's adopted unanimously. Thank you all. Mayor Pro Tem Lopez, would you please read Bill number 23-168?
Yes, thanks, Mayor. I move to advance a second reading Bill number 23-168, an ordinance authorizing the execution of an intergovernmental agreement between the City of Lee Summit, Missouri and the Southern Jackson County Fire Protection District for water services for training purposes located at 11010 Milton Thompson Road.
Thank you. We have a motion to move to second reading Bill number 23-168 by Mayor Pro Tem Lopez, seconded by Councilmember Hodges. Discussion? Seeing none, please cast your vote. Councilmember Pryor?
Aye.
Thank you. All votes are in. Please record the vote. Does move to second reading. Mayor Pro Tem Lopez, would you please?
Yes, sir. I now move for adoption of Bill number 23-168, an ordinance authorizing the execution of an intergovernmental agreement between the City of Lee Summit, Missouri and the Southern Jackson County Fire Protection District for water services for training purposes located at 11010 Milton Thompson Road.
Thank you. We have a motion to adopt Bill number 23-168 by Mayor Pro Tem Lopez, seconded by Councilmember Hodges. Discussion? Please cast your vote. Member Pryor?
Aye.
All votes are in. Thank you. And it's adopted unanimously. Thank you. Councilmember DeMora, would you please read Bill number 23-159?
Thank you, Mayor. I move to advance the second reading Bill number 23-159, an ordinance approving the bylaws of the Lee Summit Visitors Bureau and Missouri 501c6 Corporation in Lee Summit, Missouri.
All right, thank you. We have a motion to adopt Bill number 23-159 by, I know Councilmember DeMora read that. There we go. And seconded by Councilmember Hodges. Discussion? Yes, Councilmember Edson.
We were doing so well, Mayor. We were just getting through these ordinances.
Yep.
So now it's all coming to a screeching halt.
Okay.
Okay. So as you know, this was pulled off the agenda last week and sent to CEDC, which we discussed it last Thursday. And we had a full committee meeting. And we did really well. We got through almost all of it. We had a slight disagreement over the appointments to the board. And I'm going to depend on my committee members and make sure that I'm describing this correctly. The disagreement was that the mayor appoints 6 members, and then our community partners nominate members to the board. So unless Councilmember Felker, Hodges, or Pryor want to jump in, there's a discrepancy over how much the mayor has, how much say the mayor has over those nominations. So whether the community partners nominate their person and we have to take them, or whether they nominate them to the mayor and council and we get a say as to, maybe not, you know, is that person going to be a good fit? Is there somebody that may not be good on the visitors bureau? My feeling was I wanted the mayor and council to have more influence and be able to say yay or nay to those nominations. Other committee members said no, because we're trying to improve these relationships and we need to have faith that they want this bureau and this board to work well together. You know, neither feeling is wrong, but we did come to a sticking point on how that was going to work out. And so I would like us to, and we wanted the council, we thought it was important enough for the council to discuss and come to some agreement on what that's going to look like.
Okay. Let me first share what some of the experiences I have are, if that'd be good with everybody. So we have the different boards and commissions, and this one's a little bit different because you're getting nominations and such. With the boards and commissions though, and you guys know how many there are, and sadly, I think I've complained about how hard it is sometimes to pick or to get people, you know, onto these boards and commissions. But there is a check and balance there. I know that the mayor appoints, but it still has to have council approval. And I do remember years ago when I first started, I never really had a whole lot of issues, but every once in a while someone would say to me before the meeting, they'd say, hey, the person you got on this agenda is like, do you know about this and that? And I did pull some people from the agenda, from consent. So I had to amend the agendas because let's just say, so I try to interview anybody that I put on, I try to interview, and I try to get you all to give me recommendations, a lot like the nominating committees would. But then I interview them and I try to make sure they're a good fit. And I also research them. Like if they're on social media, bad-mouthing one of us, one of you, or me, I take them off. And I think I've done really good at that because what I would always worry about is the last thing we want to really do is come up here and all of a sudden be discussing someone's character, you know, from the dais. And so I've done everything I can to avoid that conflict. Now, does it mean sometimes you might have not appointed somebody talented? Yes, probably so. But I felt that we really needed the collaboration and the relationships. So there were some people I didn't take a chance on early on. I would also say that that there were some committees when I first became mayor that came to me, the chairperson, and said, we don't want, you know, here's who we want. Or they would say, we don't want you to make any changes. We want all these same people. And I was like, well, those are the same people that have been there for 20 years. And, you know, I think we need to at least bring somebody new into the situation. So can't we talk about somebody new or who's, you know, how is your committee performing and such? So I try to consult with chairs whenever I do those types of things. So I try to create that conversation. There's some chairs that don't offer much sometimes, and I think that was a problem too in the past, but I think it's getting a lot better. I will say that I was given a little bit of a heads up on this because, and I'm just being very transparent with y'all. This came up in the EDC exec meeting today. And it just was like, they wanted to know if they should be getting me a name. And I was like, well, yeah, get us a name. But I would have concern if I couldn't say no to that name from that council right now, given the relationship. It's been pretty tense. So those are some things that we'd have to think about. I definitely, here's the thing. I feel like a few years ago, I know we talked about, should they be at least Summit citizen? And we worked through that. We came up with a solution. So whatever it is we're trying to solve for here, we can solve for it. I just want to make sure we're not up here talking about people's character. I just would rather avoid that situation. I'd rather do the due diligence up front and have checks and balances between a nomination committee. Then you got the mayor that has to decide whether he wants to go ahead and bring it forth to the council. Then the council has to decide if they want to give consent. I like that process. I think that's how it works everywhere else as far as charter and things of that nature. But I mean, again, this group put together I called it a city-friendly bylaws. So I'm not super concerned about it. It's kind of letting you all hear kind of from my perspective, it gets really tough sometimes when you're doing these committees. So, or committee appointments and such. So to think that I would have to bring someone forward that was calling one of you or me corrupt on social media, that'd be really tough for me to do. So, so that's that. There we go. I'll let you guys talk from there.
Yeah, so I guess that's really the question, is whether or not I have it as they can nominate, but you kind of have right of first refusal and go, I don't like your nomination. You know, or this isn't going to work for us, or whether their nomination is, okay, we got to take that. You know, I think that's kind of the clarity we're looking for. And again, I'll leave it up to the committee members to chime in too.
I'm a little confused though whenever I hear you say it that way, because then it makes me think, like technically, I mean, I put everything on the agenda I'm supposed to as fast as I possibly can, but like I do kind of get to control the agenda, do I not, Mr. Head? I mean, it's like saying I have to bring something forward on an agenda a certain way, which I've never had that problem, but.
Well, and I think too that maybe we need to look at the language in the bylaws, because, well, the language says they will nominate. So, Mr. Head or Crystal, do you want to chime in here and kind of help me clarify this?
Crystal Weber, Assistant City Manager. The current language, as it's entered in Exhibit A, says that they nominate, and that all of that nomination comes before council or comes to you. So let's say, I'm just going to pick on the EDC since we mentioned it. Let's say the EDC, they select Big Bird, and Big Bird has not been behaving well lately, or I don't know, maybe he's up for indictment, something just really, really crazy. And you don't want to put Big Bird in front of the council with your slate. You do not, as the bylaws are written now, have to put Big Bird in front of the council. The only way the EDC gets someone on the board is that they're going to have to nominate someone that you're willing to put before the council for confirmation. The alternate language that's included in, which is what the committee was discussing as an alternate, is they don't nominate, they directly appoint to the board. So whoever the community partner selects is on the board without council consideration. Is that a good plain language way of saying it? So right now, as written, they nominate, and you can choose or not to bring those nominations before the council. Now, what you can't do with the way the bylaws are written is just pick your own person, because of course they're representing that board. So
yeah, no, that
you would
all
work
makes
with
sense.
that board. I'm assuming if there's any
I'm fine with
concern,
that.
yeah,
I'm
you
fine
would
with that
work with that
language.
board and figure it out. And
Yeah.
yeah.
Because if I would just say if I had an issue, I would call the organization that made the recommendation and say, oh my gosh, do you guys know that about this issue? I mean, we could be in litigation with somebody, and
they may not be aware.
That's right. They wouldn't be aware of that.
And no offense to Big Bird. If we get Big Bird hate mail, I'm sorry.
Yeah. So, I mean, we really could be in litigation with someone, and then they are all of a sudden in front of us for us to approve, and we can't really, I'm assuming we wouldn't want to talk about that. Let me let some other people chime in. Councilmember Felker, and then I'll get to Councilmember Pryor.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Councilmember Edson, for queuing us up with what we talked about in committee. But maybe to clarify something, I was kind of listening to that conversation right there. I see it one of two ways. Current way, mayor, of the 9 appointments, 12, you would appoint 6 directly with council consent. 3 would be nominated by those community partners. You would choose whether to bring them to us. And then I believe the other 3 are simply appointed by city manager, but still have to come for approval after you then appoint. So city manager presents, you appoint, council confirms. That would be the process under our current draft.
Yes, sir. And the city manager is listed as nominating the staff so that it never looks like council is directly selecting staff, because that would be a little charter consideration. But the mayor then could choose to not bring forward whoever the city manager nominates as well. Hopefully that doesn't happen.
Things are ugly.
We have bigger concerns if that happens. But that's correct, Councilor Halter.
And then the alternative was mayor still is responsible for the 6 appointments, and then at least we focused really on the 3 partners. We didn't talk a lot about the city part, but the focus was that the 3 community partners would have appointment power as opposed to cycling through council. And my thoughts were really kind of a couple different things. One was, I think we always have to look out to the future. I mean, we kind of just did the way we discussed this, looking at, well, what if so-and-so, what if such and such happens? Well, what if we have a mayor who has, and this isn't mayor not characterizing anything towards you, just if there is a future situation where a mayor has some kind of animus toward one or the other of these boards, was one of the thoughts that was running through my head. And then another thought was, well, these are our community partners, and we already know we're going to likely have other agreements with them that may clarify relationships, funding going forward. And each of these boards have volunteers that, like us, love the city, love the cause that they volunteered for. And in my mind, I felt like they deserve the dignity of being able to appoint to something that we're sliding them as being kind of an equal partner, almost to grant them that. I suppose that could result. So in that scenario, kind of earlier, if they appointed someone who was in fact in litigation with the city, we wouldn't actually see it under this alternative. I don't think it would come to us. It would just be that person would be appointed. Hopefully, if something like that happened, there would be conversation, I think, to be had with whatever appointing board that would be. So I suppose you can see extreme circumstances in either direction, and I just erred in the direction of thinking I wanted to look to these boards as being partners with us in this organization that's going to promote the city. It's in its mission to promote tourism, et cetera, in the city of Lee Summit. So that was my thinking, and also giving them the opportunity to, well, so another thought is, what if a mayor wants to appoint people and have just his or her perspective on the board for this organization? Well, in my opinion, I think that diversity of thought that could come from whatever the chamber board presents, whoever they put to serve on that board, or whoever the downtown Main Street appoints, or the economic development organization appoints. I think that kind of distinction and difference is a valuable part of the collaboration that would be happening. So those are my thoughts. Again, I think they're kind of in both directions are both good. At the end of the day, I think there's some checks and balances. I just erred on one side of the coin, if you will, on how this might play out.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Pryor.
Thank you, Mayor. And sorry for any background noise. My kids are here. And I completely agree with both I agree with both sides. I can see both points. My only concern or where I was coming from was, I know that I feel like you're fair in appointing people and that you do a good job in appointing people. My only concern is if future mayor, future council, specifically mayor, we don't know what's going to be in the future. So my concern was just looking at mayors and councils past our council, and we don't know necessarily who's going to be in place and what type of, how they will appoint people, or if they'll be fair in appointing people. And I kind of felt like maybe that eliminated potential conflict for the future past what we have currently. So that's where I was coming from, but I really see both points.
All right, thank you. I would like to comment on that one, but I can let you go first.
Oh, it's up to you.
I'll just say that two things, I think. One would be, I definitely don't think that this would, I think there'd be more conflict if we did this, if we gave them a direct. I'm okay with the nominating like you have in the language right now. I totally get that. But if they were to directly appoint to the board, I'm a little concerned about that, because I mean, this is a DMO. I mean, we're like funding this whole thing. This is taxpayer dollars. I'd rather that be in the hands of elected officials. And then second part of that was, I really feel like that's like more of a charter discussion. Like, I'm not sure when the next charter review comes up, but I think these types of monumental type of decisions would be better for that type of situation. But Councilmember DeMore, you know all about the charter. Tell me, what are your thoughts on that?
Thank you, Mayor. I can see points, good points in each. However, I do side on the side of full approval through, or recommending from you full approval from the council, because sitting here thinking about a direct nominee to go onto the DMO without approval would create, and for lack of a better explanation or word, we would be relying to not have that person come all the way through. We would I don't want to have to rely on hearsay and side comments that I know something about this person, they're not fit for this DMO. I think it would be better for us to be presented that nominee, and then by that time I think that the nominee would be fully vetted and know that if there's anything in the background that could deter the council, it's we're not going to go forward with that. I guess more of I know I'm not making myself completely clear, but I don't want to get into the case of a direct nominee that is, presented and is on the board regardless, then something come back that would have prevented that person from serving. And then that creates all this hearsay and all this inter discussion mode. If I'm making myself clear, I would rather forego the aftermath of something that went wrong. Just have the council go ahead and have the say. If that makes any sense.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Yep. Councilmember Lovell.
Thanks, Mayor. I just had some questions. So how is the DMO different than, say, like our chamber, right? So the city would fully fund the DMO. Would there be investors or partners kind of like a chamber runs? So, right, it's essentially our internal organization, correct?
Yeah, it's not membership based. Go ahead.
So it is a 501c6, so it technically will have members,
but members are anybody in an industry which is served by it. So they don't necessarily have to have a paying dues structure. And if you'll remember, the study that we conducted recommend that we not do that, because in DMOs of our size, that tends to create conflict in haves and have-nots in participation. So for our best success, they advise that we didn't have a dues-based structure. They're hoping in the future to seek all kinds of funding, and there will likely be a funding request coming to the council. We all know that. But that will be the first phase of the board's work, is to come up with a tourism plan. So that outlines our tourism assets now and in the future, and where we can build upon those and where we probably don't need to spend our attention. A strategic plan for the board of how to implement and grow those assets, and a funding and resources plan, which will help them bring their request to the council. So they'll be bringing forward to you specifically what they're going to do, when they're going to do it, and how they plan to fund it. So
I think that's great, actually. And remembering just, going back to that presentation. So I think, looking at this, I'm trying to find similarities, kind of how we do stuff now. And since it is something that's an internal organization of the city, it sits outside, obviously, as a 501c, whatever. 3. I don't know the difference between all of them. That, going outside our community partners, say, like, Chamber, we'd love for you to recommend someone for our approval. Would that person have to be on the board at the chamber, or does it matter, or is it?
the way the bylaws are written, the boards can select based on whatever criteria they choose to select for their nomination, so it doesn't have to be a board member. And if it helps the council at all, representatives from each of those partners were on the planning committee for the bylaws, and we're supportive of the current structure. So.
And then just thinking of it too, like, so they make a recommendation, right? And then the mayor would then at that point say, okay, let's bring this to council, but you would have veto power immediately off of that recommendation to say, let's try something else, or give us a few candidates, or whatever that might be. But ultimately, it still comes to us, and we as a body get that opportunity to vet that individual and decide if we're in agreement with the mayor's recommendation and also the other one. I mean, am I understanding that properly and kind of the process?
I think so, but let me repeat it just to make sure.
Oh, well, here, I'll just repeat it. It's like they would recommend someone. Ultimately, they're going to recommend someone to the mayor. The mayor is going to decide at that point. He or she has the opportunity at that point to say, I'm good with that. Let's take it to the council. And at that opportunity, we'd have a chance to ratify that recommendation. So we still have purview over, we're giving them the ability to bring someone before us, and then we have the ability to do that. And it's also our organization that does not have outside investors. And so, I'm just, thinking this through is differently, because I think it's easy to take this and go and think of it as it applies to some of our other groups, like a chamber or an EDC, and it's completely different. It is our organization. And then I also think about how we appoint to other committees. We also have the opportunity, as the mayor makes recommendations, to look through those, whether that be planning commission or even some of the other cultural commissions or whatever. So, okay, well, I was just trying to make sure I understood the formation of the DMO and how it sat and how it was different from some of those other ones. And then that process to know that even if, like, you had a mayor that you disagreed with or the recommendation they have, we still as a body have that opportunity to say, hey, we're not in agreement here, and we'd like to send this back to them and rework this too. So it sounds like those checks and balances are still there. Okay, that's it.
I think
just
so.
Talking it through,
I agree with everything you said, and I think it is there. But I do want to say that by leaving, we did, with the way this is written and giving the organizations as much freedom as we have to pick what their criteria for picking. I will tell you that the EDC did ask today if the person they recommended or had to be a member.
And do we have an answer on that, or?
I didn't have.
I mean, you think they would? You think they would, right? But I mean, I don't know.
I told them I thought, I don't remember what I said. They're trying to prepare. Yeah.
Well, I don't have any more questions. I don't know if that was really a question, but just trying to talk it through. But thanks, Mayor.
I think if you're comfortable with the way it's written, I'm totally comfortable with it. But if you're looking to make an amendment, the discussion. Councilmember Pryor, you turn your camera back on. You want to jump in?
Yes, well, I just had a quick question. How is it determined who gets to appoint a member? Like, how is it determined that it's the chamber and downtown Lee Summit Main Street and the EDC? How is that determined?
I don't understand the question. Go ahead.
Councilmember Pryor, are you asking why are those the three specific community partners that were included?
Yes.
So those were the three specific community partners included. If you remember when we did the study, they highlighted those as being folks that directly influence tourism and were also previous providers in some part to our community tourism program when we had just sort of a loose partnership among everything. Chamber kind of took the lead, the city had a role, EDC had a role, and downtown had a role. That's how they were selected.
And I'm completely fine with that. I just didn't know, with the EDC no longer getting funding, I didn't know if that still kept them in that same role. I'm fine with it. I just didn't know how that all worked out.
That's a good point, Councilmember Pryor. That's a good clarification. So the bylaws as written don't specifically say the EDC. They say the city's recognized economic development office. So whatever comes in the current study and work that the city is doing will determine what agency or what organization or what body makes that recommendation.
Okay, so whatever direction we choose to go will be the one that then appoints somebody to the board and not necessarily the current EDC. Okay, that makes more sense then. Okay, perfect.
Yeah, thanks for pointing that out. I'd forgotten to mention that.
Thank you very much.
Okay, before I go to Councilmember Edson, one quick thing too that I forgot about. I did explain in that meeting today that so this is a positive. I really like the way the bylaws are written because it does include all these different people picking these or recommending and have these different organizations on the as representatives on the board, as well as city and such. And I said I really appreciated that because we actually did have tourism before. It was called community marketing. And these are not opinions when I say this, okay? I was a big fan of the person in charge of community marketing. Big fan, genius. I think he is and was, and but EDC didn't like him, and they didn't work together. And there was no board like we're going to put together to make them work together. And the only, actually, you know who had to referee most of it was the city manager. They were always trying, you remember this, they were always trying to get the organizations to work together. And this is a much better structure. This is a good structure. However, whatever route we go. So Councilmember Edson.
Yeah, just a couple of comments, Mayor. I just want to point out, and I'm sure the council members saw it when they read through the bylaws, but there will be a council liaison appointed to this board, and there'll be a non-voting member. So that's in there. Councilmember Felker separated the secretary and treasurer positions, which I think was really helpful because this is a big board and it's going to grow into a big organization really fast. So having two different people as opposed to one, I think that was a great addition. And I hope that as this board is built out, that we have representatives from all over the city, from all four corners of the city, and not just the core center of the city. So I hope somehow that geography is taken into account too, somewhere along the lines. But thank you.
That's brutal. That last part is brutal. It is so hard. But yes, you're right. It needs to be from all corners. But it can be a real challenge on some of these committees getting that. Or how about this? Usually we can start that way, but it's hard sustaining it over time.
Well, I think, and I just, maybe not representative, but for example, up on the north side, we've got that new go-kart place and the scuba place is coming. I mean, those are going to be assets for tourism, right?
Yeah, well, SLR's coming too.
Yeah, so I want to make sure that that's included in whatever tourism plans or somebody's looking out for those folks, I guess. Thank you.
Yep, thank you. I think these are all good discussions because I think in some way we're going to have these same discussions about another organization soon. representation on the board, and so this is all healthy stuff. Are you guys okay moving forward with this? Yeah, I think so. Welker?
Bet. So I'm glad we had the discussion. I think, to be very honest, I didn't feel like the four of us could really, on this kind of, I felt at least it was important enough to have the discussion as a council, and so I appreciate Councilmember Edson leading our committee and then bringing that up here. I still hold this, I get the same opinion. But at the end of the day, this is still, I think, drafted in a way that allows for some checks and balances. So I'll vote for it. Button here in a few moments. Again, just with a little bit of reservation, but I think that, and actually, Councilmember Lovell, when you walked through it, you gave me another thought, which was there's at least three different ways this checks out, right? You've got a nomination that comes up. Okay, so that's one check. You've got the mayor who can check it. But if the mayor decides to give us someone that we don't like, or whoever the future council is, we can check that too. So,
just tell me ahead of time so I can pull them off I'll just pull them off the agenda.
Yeah, right. So I thank you, Councilmember Lovell, for kind of walking through that to see that other part of this. So at the end of the day, what this is, and I think where I was driving my thoughts on giving them the power simply to appoint was giving them a real collaborative voice in this that didn't have to kind of run through a gauntlet of sorts that might not be friendly at some future date. So I would hope then that if, let's say there is a mayor who's unfriendly to fill in the blank, one of our community partners here, I would hope that there still is enough on council who can maybe sort that out at a future date. Again, hopefully none of us have to see that kind of a show put on, but that's why we try to hash it out now, I think, to an extent, so that we can have the checks and balances in place to have a good system for future. So, Mayor, that's all I have.
All right, thank you. Councilmember DeMoro?
Thank you, Mayor. As long as we're hashing stuff out, do we need to define how a city council liaison is going to be selected? Or is that going to be a volunteer position?
I just assumed it was the mayor pro tem that works with the council to decide what their liaisons to.
Yes, because these are bylaws for an organization outside our own, we didn't specify how you choose that liaison because that's your internal business and that process could change in future years. So we didn't want to try to bind the council with an outside agreement. So
I think that's my point.
Yeah.
What you said.
I'm not sure that, Mr. Head, did you hear that last question? Do we leave it to the pro tem or to do like he does with the other committees, or do we need to be more specific right now?
I believe it falls to the mayor pro tem. Under section 3.4 of the charter, subsection C, under duties, the mayor pro tem shall appoint, with the advice and consent of a majority of the council, all council committees and council liaisons not later than the first regular meeting of the city council in June. Any appointment of a city council committee or council liaison shall be for 1 year, subject to removal by a vote of majority of the council. So I believe council liaisons to whatever boards and commissions are appointed by the mayor pro tem under the provisions of the charter.
But you said also approved by the council?
Yeah, I mean, it comes, the liaisons and the committee appointments are always made at the same time.
Right.
And the council generally approves that as an entire slate.
Thank you, Mr. Head. Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to. I figured that's where we would go with it, but I just wanted it to be said, and that way everybody would know how that's going to work. Thanks.
Good. Thank you, Councilmember Lovell.
Yeah, and I just just kind of based on what we discussed here, my view on this is different because of the organization and the structure of itself, and I think it is different than a chamber or an EDC, and understanding that both are viable components to our city and what they do. And this is very targeted and specific as to what we're going to do. And it's kind of like our baby to create and mold and have this opportunity to work with those other community partners and serve a viable component to the growth of our city. So I think that's why I'm liking the format that we've created here. Is I do feel like it's different than some of those other community partners that we work with. So yeah, I'm in favor of as it's written. So thanks.
All right, thank you. Before we vote, I'll just say that I do hear lots of stories from my fellow mayors, and so these are good conversations to have, because it's not all rosy and kumbaya out there. It's pretty. It can be a little tense on some other councils around the metro. So I don't think this council would let me get away with doing crazy stuff, but who knows? I don't ever try. So if there's no further discussion, I'm going to call for the vote. All right, please cast your vote. Councilmember Pryor.
Thank you. Aye.
You, all votes are in. Please record the vote. That does. Oh, gosh, we're still on. Yeah, we're still on. Oh my! So we got to vote on that again. So it did pass unanimously. But Councilmember Demora, would you please read for adoption?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I move for adoption, Bill number 23-159, an ordinance approving the bylaws of Lee Summit Visitors Bureau of Missouri 501c6 Corporation in Lee Summit, Missouri.
Thank you. We have a motion to adopt Bill number 23-159 by Councilmember Demora, seconded by Councilmember Edson. Discussion? Please cast your vote. Councilmember Pryor.
Aye.
Thank you. All votes are in. Please record the vote. Bill is adopted. That is a big step towards taking the next step to put together a DMO. Something that a few of you have been talking about for a very long time. That takes us to proposed ordinance's first reading. Councilmember Edson, would you please read Bill number 23-169?
Thank you, Mayor. I move to advance to second reading Bill number 23-169, an ordinance repealing ordinance number 9719 passed by the Council of the City of Lee Summit on July 25th, 2023, and enacting in lieu thereof a new ordinance authorizing the City of Lee Summit to require fingerprinting of applicants or licensees in specified occupations for the purpose of receiving state and national criminal history record information.
All right, we have a motion to move to second reading. Bill number 23-169 by Councilmember Edson, seconded by Mayor Pro Tem Lopez. Discussion? Yes, Councilmember Felker.
Thank you, Mayor. Is this the one we talked about at length previously, correct? And we decided we wanted to narrow it. Is that essentially what we're trying to accomplish here?
Yes, Brian Head, City Attorney. A few meetings ago, I don't remember exactly the date, we had the original ordinance in front of you that allowed the city to apply for for an ORI to be able to access these systems in order to do non-criminal justice related background checks. At that time, the council had questions about specifically about volunteers. Internally, we also had some questions about whether we really needed to include employees. We did our due diligence. We did some checking, and here's where we landed. The city already does background checks on many of its employees. I don't know that Parks in particular, with all of the part-time people it does, I don't know that it's possible for them to do background checks on every employee. And if I'm misstating this, Joe can throw something at me. But we already have the ability to do background checks on employees. What we've done is contracted with a third-party service that provides that service for us. The employee comes, they fill out a form, and then they have to go get the background and they bring it back to us, or they tell them to send it to us. So we get the background that way, and we're not using the national criminal justice systems that the city has access to. So we've already solved the issue that we need to with employees. With regard to volunteers, volunteers is a much bigger discussion that staff internally, if we ever want to really do that for all volunteers, that's a large discussion that we need to have that we have not had. the police department already has the ability, using their criminal justice background check system, already has the ability to check volunteers that are going to volunteer with the PD or contractors with the PD. So we also didn't feel ultimately that we needed to have that authority for volunteers. If we determine as staff and council, if we believe we need to have some broader authority, we can always add that authority later. But the ordinance that you have in front of you is essentially identical to the one that you had, except the employee provision and the volunteer provision were removed. Everything else is basically the same. This has already been sent up to our contact with Highway Patrol. They didn't believe that the changes that we were making would at all impact our ability to ultimately receive this non-criminal justice authority. So with that, we would recommend passage of this ordinance.
Thank you, Mr. Head. And Mayor, I think that's all I needed. Thanks.
All right, thank you. Any further discussion, questions for Mr. Head? Okay, then we will go ahead and I'll call for the vote. Councilmember Pryor.
Aye.
Thank you. All votes are in. Please record the vote. It does move to second reading, 8-0. And that takes us to committee reports. Any committee reports? Thank you to the CEDC for doing that emergency, whatever. What'd you call it? Special session?
Like we were back in COVID. We had to do a Zoom meeting.
Yeah.
We did it by Zoom.
Oh, Mr. Dunning, because just Councilmember Felker just said felt like we were back in COVID. I don't. Can you make sure that our newer council members know how to get on the VoteCast from home? Can you have somebody get in contact? Do you know how to do that? We have council members that don't know how to get on VoteCast from home. There's some buttons you got to click on your surface, and then you can vote. So you don't have to say aye like Councilmember Pryor has tonight. So we just need to take them through those steps. Yep, certainly can. All right, council comments. Council comments. Yes, sir. Councilmember Felker.
Thank you. And Mayor, you might be something I'm going to ask about your interaction with EDC today, and also if I could kind of loop into that question. Going through the DMO conversation led me to ask, well, what are we doing now? Pause for a second. I think when we started looking at the bylaws, there was maybe in part a concern of we had our DMO question or conversation, so many months ago, and then we were presented with the bylaws, and from a council to staff or staff to council perspective, I didn't realize what had been going on in the interim. And so I think I'm applying that same question, if you will, to our efforts post our community meeting about economic development. What are we doing what's staff doing in the interim? And so I'm asking that question, and then Mayor, I know
Right.
you'd had a meeting today, so perhaps you can, however you want to direct
I'll let
this.
Mr. Dunning start, and then I can kind of talk about kind of today a little bit. So from a staff perspective, we still work with Teresa Evans as the interim director on all things economic development. So those working relationships continue. From kind of a status update, since that stakeholder meeting, the consultant, Thomas P. Miller and Associates, is preparing their recommendations. So we were hoping that September 5th would be a good target date for that, but that's pretty quick for them. They'd like to they recognize how much stakeholder involvement and how significant economic development is for the city. So I'm working with Mayor Baird on when is the right time to bring that TPMA, I'll call them, back forward with their recommendations. So that's where we're at. They're still developing all that stakeholder feedback and preparing the recommendations for consideration by the mayor and the council.
So what we're waiting on is really the consultant who are are they working independently, or, I mean, I assume they probably have to ask for some data or some feedback. I mean, they've got all of what all of us and the others there provided, but are they just kind of working in a silo, or?
They're coordinating with us as staff as well on bringing forward their recommendations. So it's not like they collected all that stakeholder information and they're just working purely in a silo, and then they'll show up without having discussions with us.
Okay. And maybe this is too premature to ask, but I guess when we did this with Mr. Wisnant, if I say his name right, with the DMO, he presented his recommendations in a document form, and I would assume we're going to see something similar from TPM. If they come back, they'll present something that is kind of laying out what their thoughts are and kind of synthesizing the feedback that we all gave in the stakeholder meeting.
That's correct. They're just like their best practices report. What we envision is there would be a written recommendation document, but then in addition to that, the slides, right? That they would do for the mayor and the council at that meeting to walk through their recommendations.
I can try to add to the conversation. Some of the questions we got today, like, what do you think? They kind of similar. They're like, what do you think is going to happen? And I'm like, I think they're going to give us options, because that's what they talked about the last time. But they're going to say, hey, here's the pros and cons. Here's the pros and cons. Here's the pros and cons. At least that's what I hope they do, because I think it's important for all of us to make this decision together. Because I don't have a specific plan, but I can tell you that options are going to be somewhere in this range, right? Restart with the current EDC, or start a new EDC. They probably would. The EDC has said they would work with us in that manner. In the past, they have. Put it all under one umbrella, which would mean like a merge with the chamber, or take it in-house. And I will tell you all today that I just felt like we're going so slow. This is taking so long. And yes, I did push for September 5th because the EDC wants to know what our path is. And so I have been pushing this from behind, saying, when are we going to meet? When are we going to meet, Mark? When's, how about September 5th? And, now I'm getting it that, no, it's not going to be September 5th. But the reality is we shouldn't be rushing into this. And that's what I told the EDC today. I just said, hey, I know that time is of the essence for this organization, but for the council, we can't rush into a decision. And I know how long this takes. And I'm just going to tell you, it doesn't matter which one of those 4 options we go with. This is going to take time. It's going to take discussions at council. It's going to take more discussions. It's going to take more discussions in the community. So if you're wanting to wrap up a decision and have it all with a bow and everything by the end of the year, that is going to, I can see that at this point, it's not going to happen. I mean, we can start, we can make decisions, we can get on a path, but they need to make some plans because things aren't going well. One part-time employee, that, it's just either we'd have to recommit to them or restart over or do one of these other paths. So I want to get the best practices here because I want to hear what you all want to do. This has to be a group decision. It has to be all of us saying this is the path, and everybody out there in the business world has to hear us say, okay, let's go in that direction. And it might take more work sessions, or I don't know for sure. I do think we need to lean on this company because they've done this before, and I think they're experts. So there's not I think there's a lot of chatter out there talk. And some people, I think that there's this already a foregone conclusion that we're going a certain path. And that is just, I'm telling y'all, for the record, I am telling y'all there is no one path here. I'm willing to do, I can do this. I can think of all kinds of ways we can do this. I just want to be great at it, whatever we do. And I am certainly ready to go, because once we pick that path, and if we can get civic leaders to step up, like I mentioned in the State of the City speech, I'm ready to sprint towards that goal. And I know that you guys are too. So I would love to have that meeting in September, Mr. Dunning, just to engage council and hear from this consultant. I know the fifth isn't going to happen at this point, but at least by the third meeting, I'd like to have it. Help. Yeah. No, thank you. Okay. Oh, I will add this. I did tell them that I feel like without any progress at all, I feel like it's almost like we're being forced to take it in-house if something doesn't happen. You know what I mean? If we don't start moving forward. And I'm still not an advocate for bringing it in-house, even though if we had to bring it in-house, I think we could do it better than anybody. So that is, it's a weird feeling to feel like, okay, unless the civic leaders start rallying behind us in one direction or another, we might have to take it in-house. We already do so much in-house, and I just think business retention, workforce development should be outside of the city. Most of you probably agree with that, but okay. Do you have any roundtable?
Yes, Mayor, a couple things. So you're all aware that the preliminary development plan for the downtown market plaza has been submitted to the city. It kind of feels odd because we're kind of in many ways acting as the developer, but also the reviewing and approving entity on this. So with that submittal in our processes, we treat ourselves as the city no different than we do the development community. And so we have our staff reviewing those plans. And per our processes, there is to be held, a neighborhood meeting is to be held. That is required of developers, it's required of ourselves. So that neighborhood meeting, it's an informational meeting to share what is being proposed here with the neighbors. That's why we call it a neighborhood meeting. Neighbors meaning all property owners within 300 feet of the project site are to be notified of the informational meeting, the opportunity to come and learn about the project. So that informational meeting, that neighborhood meeting is occurring tomorrow night at 5:30 in the council chambers. Now, as part of that process, that is not a public hearing. I want to be very clear on that. Public hearings occur at the Planning Commission and at the City Council. This project will be going through public hearings. So as part of that, us as staff, we play a role in the process. Each of you as our board of directors, if you will, play a role in that process. And you may recall, you have a role to play. And sometimes if you participate in meetings leading up to a public hearing, that can be a cause for concern. But I did want to share with you that neighborhood meeting's occurring tomorrow night, and that information has been put out to the public. We've gone above and beyond that 300-foot rule for property owners to communicate this publicly as well to the community. So I did want to make that clear. It's 5:30 tomorrow night here in the council chambers. Our design team and we'll have staff here to walk through the downtown Market Plaza project with anybody who'd like to attend. The other topic, I recognize Councilmember Shields isn't here and Councilmember Pryor's on Zoom, but this will occur prior to our next meeting. District 1 is holding a town hall at Bridge Space. It'll be Wednesday, August 30th from 5:30 to 7. So we'll be assisting with that town hall as well. So I just wanted to reference that as well. And that's it, Mayor. Thank you.
Okay. Were you going to get the 3D tour and the stills online? Were you going to do that?
Yeah, as far as updating our website on the Downtown Market Plaza project, yes, I'm going to see. Got an update on that. Ryan may have the details there.
Good evening, Ryan Elam, Assistant City Manager. The website for the Downtown Market Plaza has been updated. The video is on the YouTube channel as well as the website, and you can get there by going to the Explore section. I believe this is connected to the internet, and I can go ahead and do there real quick if I can get the podium PC. Maybe. Yes. So on our website, under the Explore section, under Downtown Lee Summit, we now have a new link to the Downtown Market Plaza. And you can click on that, and it'll take you to the website that has project information as well as the video and the stills associated with it. And our internet is apparently slow.
Councilmember Hodges, you have a question for him?
Well, I was just going to say, I was looking on our social media account, and I noticed a lot of comments about the meeting that we're having. I just wanted a couple thoughts. It would be nice, first off, if council was told about the meeting that was going to be had. We had no idea, and people were assuming we did. And then when you say, "Oh, we didn't know," it sounds like, "Oh, sure you didn't." I just don't like being put in that position. So if we could be given a heads up about that actually happening, other than having to see it on social media when people are commenting on it. Second, I think we need to give people more advance than 4 days, because I saw somebody commented saying, "Oh, well, we gave you advance last week." I went back, it was 4 days ago was the first one, and then just yesterday. So I just think it would be nice to give people more advance so that way they have time to attend. It's not, "Oh, okay, well, it'd been nice to plan on being there, not just a couple days before," just out of respect for their time. Yeah, that was my comments. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Edson?
Thank you, Mayor. Ryan, can we upload that video to the government channel too?
I'll have to look to Cheryl. I
Thank
believe
you.
so.
Okay. Benning, anything else? Any further comment?
Yeah, Mayor, thank you.
Okay, we got through it. It seemed like that was a lot longer meeting than 2 hours and 5 minutes. Didn't it? That was nice. Well, with that said, this meeting is adjourned at 8:06.